Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell. Thank you for joining. We're going to be talking about the Iran war and what's going on with the War Powers Act and how it affects the oil market. But before we start with doing our cursory review of the news and my opinion about it, please help support the work that I do by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. You can follow me on X, GETTR, TikTok, Substack, Patreon, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, X, and GETTR. All the links are in the description of this video. Please click the like button and make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I greatly appreciate it. With that, if you want to help support the work that I do monetarily, you can support by donating on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Substack channel and Patreon channel. So please help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. I don't put stuff behind a paywall. It's the individuals that help with purchasing the products on my store and donating, being paid members to the different channels helps to disseminate this information for free. So please help support the work that I do. In addition, I also did a review about some anti-aging research from Russia, so please watch that video. I think it's might be episode 13 or 12. With that, let's go over the markets here. The oil market it went up this week and then slowly drifted down. All right. It went above the resistance level of 104 for WTI and started to drift down. All right. So now we still have elevated oil prices, and most people are starting to comment about gasoline being at $4, $4.36 in some states, $5. So it's starting to feel at the pocketbook level of the average citizen in the United States. My concern is that because the war is really not coming to a conclusion here, and it's just being extended, that oil prices may stay elevated. Now the question is, will they be elevated towards the 104 fib sequence retracement line, or will it be slightly below that, maybe in the 90s or a high 80 range? I personally think that there's going to be this trading range between 94 to 104. But over the week, we did have it spike beyond that 104 resistance level. So there's some news that came out yesterday about Trump saying the war is over and now he doesn't need to ask Congress to do any extension due to the War Powers Act of 1973. His thought process, not my thought process, but Trump's thought process is that, well, the ceasefire actually terminated the war. And therefore, the countdown has stopped in terms of needing to get further approval from Congress. Another thing that was interesting is when Hegseth was being questioned in Congress, I believe this question was actually in the House, not the Senate. But when he was in his hearings, he mentioned that, well, the actual number of days for the 60 days is less, due to when the actual start should be. Some people would say that the start was earlier, and Hegseth is saying no, the start was a little bit later because we were moving our operations into place, and the actual countdown should not have been earlier. It should have been when we did the big escalatory strike on Iran through Epic Fury. So the question is when did it start? There's a debate on when that actually date should start the countdown for 60 days. And then when you're in a ceasefire, then the countdown should actually stop to see if some sort of peace agreement can be had. So we're technically still in a ceasefire, and we're in a blockade. So Trump is basically saying, well, the war isn't continuing, and there's a blockade, and there's no firing. So I think what this is just playing games with the whole the War Powers Act of 1973, and trying to get congressional approval beyond the 60 days, or at least get an extension. So he's playing games where he's not doing that. So he's positioning our troops in a way where we can chokehold the economy of Iran to get them to make an agreement. If that doesn't happen, then the question is, what does Trump do? Does he do a new operation that resets the clock to 60 days? Who knows? Or maybe Iran capitulates. Or maybe Iran hits the United States in some way, and the United States has to retaliate. And that may actually set in motion a new operation. I think the latter is the most probable. But the point here is that the longer this takes place, the more the elevation of the oil futures market is going to be longer. So the duration of that higher future price will be longer. So that means gasoline is going to be more expensive. You're going to start hearing shortages in countries for certain downstream products, possibly even fertilizer problems for the agricultural industry. But what this will do is there's a grand shift now where countries that were dependent on Iranian oil or Middle Eastern oil will have to find a new supplier. And voila, the United States. LNG, we can export LNG to Asia. We can export oil. So it's looking like the North American region for oil will be supplying much of Asia. Now, what about Europe? Natural gas, they're going to be dependent on Russia, but they can also get it from the United States. But because of this conflict between the EU and Trump's administration, they're going to have to start investing in their energy production, especially in the North Sea. So this would mean that the UK and Norway are going to have to up production to be able to supply crude and natural gas and not be so dependent on Russia. But if they can't do that, or they don't want to do that, then what will happen is that they're going to have to come to the United States to get LNG and also crude. So there seems to be a shifting of who will be supplying the market. Another big announcement that took place last week was UAE. It was early this week, I should say. But UAE decided to leave OPEC and not be part of OPEC or OPEC plus. What that means is that they're not beholden to the quota system of OPEC. That means that UAE can produce as much oil as they want. They can lower production or increase production and not beholden to the cartel of OPEC. That means that Saudi Arabia may be losing its grip on OPEC because that's the major player. Now, people would say getting rid of a cartel would be a good thing. Well, here's the problem. The United States has aligned ourselves with Saudis to be able to be a swing producer. So if oil is too expensive, we go to the Saudis saying, hey, help us out, produce more oil, have OPEC produce more oil and bring down the price. When oil is too cheap and we are having problems for our energy producers and we start to cut down on our production, we can go to the Saudis and say, don't put so much on the market, tighten it up. So the global futures price for Brent and WTI starts to go up. So we had a relationship with the Saudis for them to be that swing producer, to fine tune and modulate the actual futures price. So if OPEC loses this, if OPEC loses its grip on being able to modulate the actual price or production of the futures market, then we'll probably lose a lever that may be needed in the future. Now, in the short run, what UAE is going to do is produce more oil to try to get market share and to be able to fix their infrastructure that's been damaged. In addition, some experts are saying that annually they can increase their revenue stream by $50 billion by being outside of OPEC. But that $50 billion is going to be taken from someone else. You know, it could be Omar, it could be Bahrain, it could be the Saudis, Kuwait, Iran. If they get into the open market, it could be taken away from Iraq. So, you know, the question here is what does this mean for short-term and long-term oil prices? Short-term, it's going to mean what's going on with the UAE is I think that the UAE is going to be producing more oil to try to build back their infrastructure because their economy is hurting. Now, they've been asking the United States for some sort of swap loan to help with their economy. I suspect that the United States actually supported the idea that they left OPEC to be able to grow their economy and guarantee a flow with that swap. So they're selling oil, and then they can pay back that swap. So the overall supply chain is changing in the world, and it's going to help the United States energy producers, but it's also going to help Russia. Now, what does this mean for China? Well, China now is going to be more dependent on the United States and Russia and less dependent on the Middle East. And short term, because the blockade's still in place, we're still going to have elevated prices. That's going to help UAE selling oil. It's going to help the Saudis, right? Because the price is higher. But the problem is that the flow of oil is shut off, or it's to a trickle in the Strait of Hormuz. So the strait has to open. Now, the blockade for the Iranians is basically to choke the Iranian economy. Trump can play this out But as in the news, as the blockade lasts longer and longer, then the average price will be elevated for oil throughout the rest of this year, unless there's some agreement that takes place and we remove the blockade. Because if there's a blockade and the Iranians still have capability to hit the tankers, then tankers aren't going to be flowing through the strait with any level of flow that was similar to pre-war levels. So short term, with what Trump's doing, saying that the war is terminated, there's a ceasefire, we're maintaining the blockade, that's still going to keep prices elevated. And we're probably looking at elevated oil prices all the way into the midterm election in November. That would mean that the higher chance of Republicans losing in the House and maybe even in the Senate. So the Republicans are going to lose the legislature in terms of controlling it. How fast can the chokehold of the blockade hurt Iran? How fast can it get them to capitulate? Who knows? Now, I do think that there's infighting that's going on between more moderate leaders within the Iranian regime and the more recalcitrant leaders that are more aligned with the religious fervor of the Shiite perspective. All right. So you have really hardliners, and then you probably have a little bit more moderate, maybe right of center, and then super right wing. All right. If you want to use it in US terms. But the thing is that how long can the Iranian economy last with this blockade? It doesn't look like it could for very much longer. Now, the experts were saying weeks. Well, if that's the case, then they should be capitulating now, but they're not. So we're going to see. Now, there's also a video that took place with the BBC in the last 24 hours or so, where they were talking about operations being planned on actually taking control of one of the facilities that has the nuclear material. All right. And they go through this kind of scenario analysis. It's an interesting video. Maybe I'll play it. But it's very important to realize that this termination of the war is really just playing games, and that in reality, oil is still going to be elevated. Gas is still going to be elevated. The blockade's still in place. The United States is still chokeholding Iran, and that I don't see a real relief in the future price anytime soon. We're talking, I'm talking months. I'm not, I think that unfortunately it would have been better if Trump hit Iran and destroyed their infrastructure than to wait this thing out, because he's adding to the probability that there will be a global recession because of this elevated energy price. Now, maybe something will happen that will speed this up and everything will be fine. People that have been paying attention to me have been saying that there was a head and shoulder pattern that was starting to emerge. But that head and shoulder pattern looks like it broke because of this news of further escalating, not really reaching a true ceasefire agreement, further the blockading, the talk of maybe military operations to take the nuclear material. All these are showing signs that oil will probably stay elevated. So my perspective on the head and shoulder pattern for the WTI has been nullified. All right. There is not a head and shoulder pattern because of this week's trading in oil. If it stayed around if it stayed around like the 90 range, maybe even 104, and didn't just shoot up and go way past the 104 mark, then the head and shoulder pattern would have been established. But that did not happen. And therefore, the head and shoulder pattern is nullified. So that means that we're going to probably most likely stay in this range of 90, it could be anywhere from 94 to 104. And in some days, it may be even at 110, 115. It just depends on what's happening here. But I think global stress is starting to increase. And that one variable is that it's not just choke holding the economy in Iran, but it's also choke holding the economy worldwide. Now, it's not at the same rate. The rate of hurting the Iranian economy is probably faster than the actual rate of hurting the world economy. And if you look at it from the US economy, it's even less. But having this problem continue on, either in a ceasefire phase or a blockade phase, is not good for anybody. Iranians are going to their economy will be falling faster. The world economy will be falling at a slower rate than the Iranian economy, but it will be falling. And the United States economy will be falling, but at a slower rate than the world economy. So it's important to see these different rates of decline because of this oil elevation in the futures market. All right, with that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do. I do these videos for free, so please pay attention, get the great products, get healthy. So I want to go over a few of the products, and then we're going to go through my perspective on the mosaic of the news here. So omega-3 is super important for your cardiovascular health. It's going to help to bring down inflammation and for you to control your lipid profile. And that way you are reducing plaque formation. Super important to take every day. Magnesium and zinc helps with brain function and boosts up your immune system. Most people do not take enough magnesium in their diet, and therefore they start having problems. All right. If you increase your magnesium intake, then what will happen is that your brain function will improve. And a big part of some of the issues that people have with brain function is they don't have enough magnesium. Resveratrol. Resveratrol helps to have youthful gene expression. It also helps the health of your mitochondria, soaks up free radicals. And it helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Resveratrol stacks really well with C60 to help improve your basal layer for your skin. This is part of the reason why you look younger when you take resveratrol. Now let's talk about C60. Again, you can take it separately. You can stack it with a lot of the supplements that I've been mentioning, like resveratrol. C60, you can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and MCT coconut oil. Now, C60 is a very potent antioxidant. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. I've been taking it for over 10 years, every day, teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach for best absorption. Now, by taking C60, you're going to be soaking up the free radicals in your cell. You're going to be improving your mitochondria. Your ATP will improve. Your cells will perform better. Your tissues will perform better. That means that your glands and your organ systems will be at a level that it needs to be, at a higher performance. That means your immune system and your endocrine system will improve. And by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. At the brain level, by soaking up free radicals and reducing stress in the neuron, your neurons are healthier. Therefore, it's going to help to improve memory, help improve cognition. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60, take it a teaspoon a day, every day. Super important. And like I said, you can stack it with many of the different supplements like Boomer Boost and Max 35, ashwagandha root, lignans. Now, you can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. And the higher ounce configuration, actually, the cheaper per ounce. Ashwagandha root helps to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Bring down inflammation, helps with your cardiovascular health. Super important, and your immune system. Olive leaf extract brings down inflammation and helps with your lipid profile. So you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system. So ashwagandha root, very important. Take every day. It's dual purpose. And if you take these supplements and you stack them, you're going to be able to get synergistic benefits to help slow down the aging process. That's the key. If you only take just a few supplements, sporadically, you're not going to get you're going to get benefits, but you're not going to get the anti-aging benefits. If you take it regularly at higher concentrations and you stack them, you're getting the benefits. If you think about your biochemistry, it's not just a few molecules, it's tens of thousands of molecules that are being broken up and produced and interact that allows for your cells to perform properly. So it's about synergy in stacking. Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle. When you're 40 years of age, you can't build muscle as efficiently as when you were younger, male or female. So by taking Myotrol, it's going to help to build muscle and maintain the muscle as polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression. So please go to my store and get the Myotrol. Super important. You can stack it with Gladiator barley, which will help to build muscle and also detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. You'll notice that there's a theme to slowing down the there's a theme on slowing down the aging process. And that theme within the anti-aging protocol is bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. And target certain systems that have a certain way of aging. All right, so you're building up more energy, you're bringing down inflammation, you're soaking up free radicals, and you're helping to allow for your organ system to perform better. And when you reduce that, when you slow down that aging process, your epigenetic profile will stay younger. If you don't do it, your epigenetic profile will advance in age. It'll methylate more. And when it methylates more, you walk down the road of aging. So lignans helps to bring down that inflammation, soaks up free radicals. It helps with the immune system and the endocrine system. And you can stack it with turmeric and ashwagandha to get the max benefits to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. But by bringing down inflammation, you're also helping with your brain function. So those are just a few of the great products that I have on my store, online store. The link is in the description of this video. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. So click that link, go to the store, get the great products that I offer, stack them, and take them regularly, and you're going to slow down that aging process. Now, you also have to do proper diet and exercise and proper sleep, learn new things. When you do this holistic approach, you're going to get healthy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And make sure you use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. I want you to save some money. But better yet, I want you to get healthy, because to slow down the cost of healthcare in the United States, everyone is going to have to do their part by looking in the mirror and saying, how can you improve your health? And when you do that, then the actual healthcare costs in the society will go down. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So let's play live now, talking about the war is terminated.
Back to live now from Fox. My name is Alexandra Goldberg. Let's take a look at the White House on this Friday night. The Trump administration is arguing that the Iran ceasefire has effectively ended the war. Under this rationale, the executive branch can avoid the need to seek congressional approval for military action that extends past 60 days. Today, May 1st, is that 60-day deadline. The law we're talking about, the War Powers Act of 1973. But it appears the day will end without any action from Congress. Joining me now to discuss is Alan Weiner, Stanford Law School senior lecturer in law. Hello and good evening to you.
Nice to be with you, Alexandra.
So let's start here. Under this law, can a ceasefire dictate a termination of war?
Well, you may not be surprised to hear that the answer is we're not 100% sure about this. The War Powers Resolution in general is not something that has been litigated before the courts. And so we have different interpretations or positions of it taken by sometimes the Congress or members of Congress, and of course, the president. I think the real question is whether or not U.S. forces in the Gulf are still in a situation where they are, and I'm looking at the language of the statute right now, Alexandra, are they in a situation where there is an imminent involvement in hostilities? I think there's a very high risk of that. We have forces there that are on high alert. We're enforcing an embargo, which could create a risk of confrontation. So it's far from clear to me that the situation that the president originally notified the Congress about in his original War Powers Resolution notification has ended, even though the shooting has stopped for now.
Well, we do know that Iran continues to grip the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. military maintaining the naval blockade in the strait. I wanted to ask you, can a maritime blockade be defined as an act of war under this act?
Well, again, the resolution uses the term hostilities, and again, it's not actually just shooting, but not only hostilities, but situation in which there is a risk of imminent involvement in hostilities. And I think
and that is, I think, the main problem with this issue here, with the termination of the war in Iran. Our soldiers, our staff, our military equipment is still at risk of being hit. Not only that, Iran is still a threat to the GCC. So it hasn't really de-escalated in terms of threats. Now, in terms of kinetic involvement, actual bombardment, that has ceased. So there is a ceasefire that's taking place, but our ships, our bases, our allies in the region are at threat, imminent threat. So what does that mean? Do you have a ceasefire? I mean, technically, the Korean War never ended because it's just a ceasefire. So when we do, and our troops are in that region, by the DMZ for Korea. So, I mean, technically, the war never ended. So the point here is just that how many days are actually within that 60 that have been used up? I don't think it's all 60. In addition, because of the ceasefires and depending on when you want to count when the actual start of the 60 days. But even if there is no debate about that, ceasefires probably shouldn't be counting the 60. It should be kinetic event days. So if our troops have imminent threat, then the interpretation of the actual War Powers Act of 1973 would mean that the countdown's still continuing. But that's kind of nebulous because you have a terrorist actor like Iran that's threatening neighbors and our bases continuously. So we're always in an imminent threat with them. So do you take the baseline as a barometer to determine what is imminent level of imminent threat? If that's the case, maybe there isn't really an elevated imminent threat. See, this is the problem with trying to legislate war. You just need to win, and when you win, then it doesn't. You don't have these problems. But when you try to legislate it and put roadblocks and speed bumps in the war effort, it causes problems. But I also believe that the United States needs to rearm and to make sure that we have a contingency against China, because we used a lot of munitions. So I don't really care about the imminent threat provision that's in the War Powers Act, because we've been having an imminent threat in that region for decades. There was an imminent threat when we were in Iran and Afghanistan. I'm sorry, Iraq and Afghanistan. There was an imminent threat every time that a ship goes through the Persian Gulf. Iran could hit it because they are a terrorist actor. They're a terrorist state. So I think Trump is playing games with the whole War Powers Act of 1973, but I think it's also important to mention that what's the baseline of imminent threat with Iran? And it's very high, actually. So having the ceasefire with the blockade should stop the countdown for days of war. But you'll have lots of people out there that will want to demonize the Trump administration. On one side, they felt that Trump wasn't doing enough. And on another side, they feel that Trump's doing too much. But the point here is that it looks like Epic Fury is done, but the blockade is still in place, and it's still going to cause havoc with the energy markets. Now, Bloomberg just posted a article, and that article is dealing with Iran is resisting the U.S. blockade by slowing crude output and putting barrels into storage. Now, the question is how long can they put that oil into storage? They may have some vessels, all right, that are containers that can store, and then all of a sudden they run out. Now, here's the key. People would think, oh, you can just stop the production. Well, here's the problem. It's a pressured system. So if you stop the production, the pressure will, and you cap it, the pressure that's building up because it's a fluid, so there's hydraulics. That fluid that pressure that's building up will push into smaller crevices within the geology of the reserve, the oil reserve map. And when that pressure that's building up, when you cap the well, is moving the oil into these smaller crevices, and then you reopen up the well, you may never be able to get that dispersed oil in these other crevices. So oil production will actually go down. And a lot of times, if you have, let's say, you find an oil reserve underground and you drill into it and you start pumping, you have a stabilized pressure system and you're pumping out that oil, we'll call that level, all right, baseline at 100%. If you cap it and oil starts to disperse into these smaller crevices because of the pressure being built up, when you reopen, your oil production may be at 65 or 70% and potentially never come back. So if Iran starts to cap their wells and stops production, it may be permanent loss of 35% of the actual reserve. That's a big problem. So they have to keep on pumping it up and get it into storage. But as the blockade continues on, they're going to run out of where to store the oil, and they're going to have to turn it off. And that will be a permanent damage to the well. Permanent damage to the well. Now, there's technologies and putting fluids in to try to mix and get the oil back into the main reserve instead of the small crevice reserves, but it would take some petroleum engineering to do that. All right, and it's probably going to be drilling more to be able to get to those smaller crevices and to create pressure systems, which is more cost to do, more complicated. So Iran doesn't have many options in terms of its energy production. If they keep on going down this road, because they're not going to have this, they're not going to be able to store the oil because they don't have enough material and a manufacturing base to create storage tankers fast enough compared to the amount of oil that they need to keep on pumping out to prevent the oil well from collapsing. So time is on the United States side. But when they do get to the point where they do permanent damage to their wells, that's oil production off the market permanently. And so oil is going to start to go up even more. So how long will this last? If it's weeks, then the global economy will be okay. But if it continues on for months, that's a problem. And the probability of affecting the world growth, economic growth, is going to be a high impact, a very high impact, and it'll hurt the United States too. So you have to keep this in mind. The longer you wait, the more damage this is going to cause economically and in real production of oil in Iran.
About the risk of involvement in hostilities, clearly a blockade is a situation that presents a risk of hostilities, because what you're saying when you execute a blockade is your ship is not allowed to travel through these waters. I will stop and board your ship, and if you refuse my efforts to stop and board your ship, I will shoot at or sink your ship. So I think, yes, this still remains in my mind a situation in which there is an imminent threat of ongoing hostilities, and it appears that the president himself seems to believe that as well. The communication, the letter that he sent to the Congress, in which he asserted that the hostilities that began on February 26th have terminated, the same letter says, despite the success of United States operations, the threat posed by Iran to the United States and our armed forces remains significant. So it does seem to me that the president is himself asserting that a situation exists that involves introducing or leaving U.S. forces in a situation where imminent involvement in hostilities is indicated. And that's what requires the application of the War Powers Resolution.
Well, let's move now to some remarks today from President Trump. He was asked if he would seek congressional approval. He said, quote, "It's never been sought before. There's been numerous, many times, and nobody's ever gotten it before. They consider it totally unconstitutional." I wanted to ask you, could you just tell us a little bit about the historical use of the War Powers Act?
Sure. So, of course, the War Powers Resolution was adopted in 1973. This was after the Vietnam War. I think there was a sense on Congress's part that the president had executed far too much authority on his own. Recall the basic scheme in our system is that it is the Congress that has the power to declare war, but the president is the commander-in-chief. And there's always a tension between what can the president do as the commander-in-chief versus what can the Congress do as the body empowered to formally declare war. So we had this arrangement established in the War Powers Resolution saying that once you introduce forces into hostilities, or a situation where a risk of hostilities is clearly indicated, if you don't get congressional approval after 60 days or 90 days, if you use the 30-day extension, then you have to remove forces from that situation. Now, it is true almost every executive branch, every president since the War Powers Resolution was enacted has said that there are at least some circumstances in which the War Powers Resolution would be unconstitutional because of the president's authority to command U.S. troops under his authority as the commander-in-chief. I don't know that every president asserted that the statute is totally unconstitutional, to use the language that you said. In other words, there clearly are circumstances in which congressional approval for the use of force is required.
I'm curious about enforcement here. Can a politically gridlocked Congress enforce the War Powers Resolution?
Well, not unless it exercises its legislative powers. The War Powers Resolution has been a source of controversy, and quite apart from the War Powers Resolution, the broader question of the president's authority to commit U.S. forces to armed conflict versus the Congress's authority to declare war. This has been a subject of controversy and tension with respect to largely every major U.S. military operation since the War Powers Resolution was enacted. I think the president was simply wrong when he said executive branch has never sought authorization or approval from Congress. In fact, we have seen many cases in which Congress has authorized the use of force. It authorized the use of force in Afghanistan in 2001. It authorized the use of force in 1990 in connection with the invasion, the use of force against Iraq. It authorized the use of force again in 2002, leading up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So the Congress clearly does exercise its authorities in the war-making area. If it doesn't, though, its only tools are its legislative tools. It can pass a statute that declares the president's use of force has to cease, or in a way that raises fewer constitutional issues, it can pass a law prohibiting the use of funding for a particular military operation because it is generally uncontested that Congress has the power of the purse. This has been done by the U.S. Congress in some cases in the past. After the Black Hawk Down episode in the 1990s, Congress passed a law prohibiting the use of funds to support ongoing military operations in Somalia. But if the Congress can't pass a law, there's very little it can do. There have been efforts by individual congressmen to bring cases in U.S. courts. My former law professor, Tom Campbell, who went on to become a member of Congress, brought a lawsuit against Bill Clinton, alleging that U.S. military operations that the U.S. had initiated in Kosovo without congressional approval were unlawful. And there have been other cases like this, but courts have tended to say, this is a political question. We don't really want to get involved in a matter that should be resolved by the political branches. So if Congress is unable to muster the votes to pass legislation, either a categorical prohibition on the use of force or a restriction on funds, I think there's going to be little that Congress can do to assert its constitutional prerogatives.
Good transition into my next question. I was going to ask you about how likely is it for the courts to get involved in this case?
Yeah, very unlikely. Again, I think with respect to most of the major U.S. military operations that have been conducted by presidents without express congressional authorization, there have been efforts to bring claims. There was an effort to bring a claim regarding the U.S. intervention in Panama in 1989-90. As I mentioned, there was a claim brought regarding the Kosovo campaign. And in general, the courts have found one of their so-called prudential doctrines to say we don't have standing, the claimant doesn't have standing in this case, or this is a political question. Courts have been reluctant to try to rule on these fundamentally political questions of the allocation of powers between the president and the Congress. The understanding is the most important way that we're with what happens in our November elections, when it's not necessarily the courts or the Congress that express their view, but the American people when they vote, if this becomes an issue that is germane for their electoral choices.
All right, Alan, great analysis here. Anything else you'd like to leave?
All right. So the bottom line is this: Trump has taken the stance that he's terminated the war. So it looks like Operation Epic Fury is done. The countdown stops. He doesn't need to ask for permission by the Congress, and he's just sitting there with the blockade, chokeholding Iran. Iran, it has many sanctions put on it, and he's basically forcing the Iranians to capitulate. And we're using the military to actually enforce the sanctions, the sanctioned oil. But there's an added complexity to this. By him doing this, it's also preventing China from getting oil, and India. So they're going to have to find other suppliers. Now we're going to go to CNN talking about the UAE leaving OPEC and how it will financially help them. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. This is super important when you get to age 40. Your pancreas doesn't function as well as when you was younger, no matter how healthy you are. So it's important to help digest your foods, and you'll get more energy out of it and less stress on your digestive system. So please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. It also has bromelain in it, which helps to break up clots. Vitamin C and magnesium. This is a great supplement to take every day. You can stack this with the magnesium and zinc supplement, which I highly recommend. And vitamin C and magnesium will help with your skin. It'll help with brain function and also boost up your immune system. So it's a great supplement to take every day. Again, stack it with the magnesium and zinc vitamin. Turmeric, this stacks really well with ashwagandha and lignans to help boost up that immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. It's a great supplement to take. It also helps with your joints, helps to reduce inflammation at the joint level, and helps to reduce inflammation at the brain level. And when you're reducing inflammation at the brain level, you are reducing the chances of amyloidosis, vascular issues at the brain level, and your neurons will be healthier. So it's really important. And vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is dual purpose. It'll help to boost up your energy levels, help to protect your neurons, and rev up your metabolism. This is a great supplement you should be taking if you're 40 years of age or older. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex, protect those neurons, rev up that cellular metabolism, and increase your energy levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift till supplies last. And please use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All caps, discount 5.
Autonomy. John Defterios is my former colleague with decades of experience. He knows OPEC more than is honest or healthy as our emerging markets editor. Now, senior advisor with APCO, a communications and consultancy firm. John's in Lisbon. John, why would knowing that, if they produce more, price goes down, but they're not happy with OPEC and with their quota, why would they do something so destructive to OPEC and in such a fashion like today?
I don't think they see it, Richard, as destructive. I spoke to one senior advisor to the UAE in the last 2 hours. He said, let's describe it as strategic autonomy, the ability to make its own decisions going forward. This has been in the kind of the rumor mill for the last 3 or 4 years, and the UAE was actually considering making this decision beforehand. For those of us who like to read the smoke signals, and I just came back from the region this morning. I was in the UAE and Riyadh for the last week. I heard hints of a realignment by the UAE, and I would kind of lean in and suggest this may be the first of other decisions by the UAE going forward. I think the smoke signals were the fact that there was a GCC summit in Jeddah today. The president of the UAE did not attend. He sent the foreign minister / deputy prime minister to that meeting. So many read a lot into that this decision was happening on the day of the GCC summit. And I think, Richard, they feel handcuffed in this current situation. Right. As Suhail Mazrui was suggesting in his interview, they've made a lot of contributions, but a lot of sacrifice. And being capped at 3.4 million barrels a day. Just think about this number here. At 3.3 million barrels a day at $90 a barrel, they make a lot less than they would at 5 million barrels a day. In fact, it's a $50 billion difference between 3.3 and 5 million barrels a day. That's the bottom line.
Okay, two things though, John. Firstly, I agree. The UAE has spent a great deal of money on its infrastructure and it's invested hugely and wants to get a return. But its cost of production is relatively low overall. Getting that money back, isn't this about getting market share at the cost of other OPEC members by doing this? But the risk, of course, is that if not a price collapse, you certainly have a downward pressure because of your pumping more.
Well, actually, I think this fits into a very interesting discussion about how long oil demand will stay high. Before this conflict that we saw in the Strait of Hormuz, demand was projected at 104 million barrels a day. I think this fits into the category of make hay while the sun is shining, Richard. The UAE sits on about 9% of proven reserves. They see demand holding up for at least till 2040, about 100 million barrels a day. You see some projections that demand will drop to 80 million barrels a day by 2050. So they're saying, let's front load it right now, have the freedom to do so. And also, Richard, under the CEO, the group CEO of ADNOC, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, taking instructions from the president of the UAE, they wanted to invest billions of dollars, not only in raw crude and having a trading division, but to go downstream into petrochemicals where there's higher margins. So they don't want to be constrained by OPEC or OPEC plus, for that matter.
Right, but ultimately, John, I mean, that's a very interesting point you raise about front loading. It's, as you say, make hay while the sun shines now. But the US becoming essentially the swing producer because it's so vast in its energy. And you are essentially going to end up with internecine warfare within the oil-producing countries of the Gulf. And everything that OPEC was originally designed to create is going to fall apart.
Well, you raise a very interesting point. There have been strains within OPEC ever since the shale revolution taking place. So you see the U.S. being the number one producer in the world. Last month, it was producing 13.5 million barrels a day. That's above Russia. It's above Saudi Arabia, number 2, number 3 in the world. That has profoundly changed the dynamics within OPEC right now.
Right.
And I know that the UAE position has been, Richard, why are we sacrificing when the U.S. is getting more market share? You talked about the low-cost producer. Onshore, we're looking at about $2 a barrel in the UAE. It's a low-carbon producer as well in terms of carbon capture and being efficient in that way, and $4 offshore. But I think their view is, why don't we have that independence right now? We also, one other point here is they're not really happy at the pace the GCC is moving right now. They have a very different strategy, Richard, and that is, for example, on free trade. The UAE has signed 36 trade partnerships because the GCC hasn't moved fast enough. So I think both with the GCC and the Arab League, we should start thinking differently of how the UAE sees that relationship and sees its future. That's some of the discussions I've had over the last 7 days.
Right. John, good to see you, sir. Thank you very much.
So joining me now is Faisal Abbas.
All right. So the bottom line is this. UAE will have more ability to map out their economic destiny if they get out of OPEC. Now, what is interesting is that if you pay attention to OPEC and OPEC Plus pre the war in Iran, all right, they were pumping a lot of oil. They were really going overboard in terms of how much they were pumping out of the ground. And many analysts and companies that analyze the actual flows of oil were saying what OPEC was doing and what OPEC was saying were different. What OPEC was doing pre-war, pre-Iranian war, was producing more than what was being stated to the public. All right. And the question was why? And they kept on thinking, well, maybe it's market share, which at the time made sense. But if the Saudis were given a heads up that the United States was going to get involved in Iran, then the Saudis would have been pushing for increased production out of OPEC and be able to absorb the shock. Now, they couldn't foresee all the problems. They probably thought that this was going to be much shorter and that the IRGC was going to fall quickly, especially after decapitating the theocratic leader. But I have a feeling that OPEC, not all the members, but a very select few, especially within the Saudi family, knew that the U.S. was going to hit Iran. Now, it may have been just between Trump and MBS, but I suspect that there was a plan to increase the production, knowing that there would be some sort of increase in oil price because of the war. They're selling the oil at a higher price. And they also wanted to increase production, right? Knowing that maybe if they can't get stuff out of the strait, that it was pumped out, and that once the strait opens up, even though future price would be falling, it would still be elevated to pre-war levels. So I suspect that OPEC knew that something was going to happen. Maybe not all the details, and they probably thought it was going to last shorter in duration than what is happening here. I think even our military thought that it was going to be a shorter war with Iran. It's surprising the resilience of the IRGC. But this chokehold and cutting them off with the blockade is going to accelerate the process where they capitulate. Now, how long it takes, who knows? How much damage to GCC facilities, we don't know. But I suspect there was something in OPEC where they were given a heads up that something big was going to come and that it was important to produce more oil. And this is important. Why? Because there's actually two oil pipelines that are important to get around the Strait of Hormuz. The pipeline within UAE and the pipeline that goes from north to south for the Saudis. So if you pump more oil, especially in these two regions, yes, you're not being able to flow the oil as well as previously through the Persian Gulf. But you can mitigate the problem by a lot by having the redirection of that flow of crude. So you pump it all up, you pump it up, have it in storage, and then redirect if you need to at a higher oil price. So they pump it out at $58, $60, $5 a barrel. And then all of a sudden you're selling it at 100, 110, 115. So I suspect something was up with OPEC. I think they knew something was coming. They may not have known all the details, what day it was going to happen or whatever. But it seemed as though, looking back in hindsight, that OPEC was producing more oil before the war to be able to buffer the shock of the war. And to also benefit because you pumped it out at a cheaper price and you're selling it at a much higher price. All right. Now the next video I want to go over is about this the changing oil order. This is by DW. Before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. This will get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks. And when you take this every day, drink it with filtered water, and what you'll notice is that your neurons are actually connecting better, positive neuroplasticity. And when your neurons have more dendritic connections, you're thinking faster and you have better memory. So to help with brain function and to improve your cognition, take the clarity factor, take it every day, drink it with filtered water, and you'll notice you'll be able to concentrate better and you'll have better brain function. It's a great neurostack. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And also, taking a good probiotic is super important. And the foundation of my anti-aging protocol, you take the multivitamin that I have in my store and you take the probiotics. That's the foundation. In terms of the probiotic, you can get it in the veggie cap form and also in the powdered form. I prefer the powdered form because I take a lot of different powders like the collagen and the lignans and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost. So for me, mixing it together in soft foods like hummus works really well. So you can get it in the powdered form or in the veggie cap form, but taking a good probiotic is super important because it's going to help with your digestion. When you're improving your gut biome, you're going to be able to digest your food better and easier. You're also reducing inflammation. You're going to have a better immune system at the gut level. You'll have more concentration of IgA. You'll have a thicker mucosal layer. You're going to be reducing allergies because you're reducing leaky gut syndrome. And your metabolism will be better. You're going to have a better communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to be able to concentrate better. And you'll also have healthier skin. So you get many benefits by having a better gut biome. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get either the powdered version of the probiotic or the veggie cap version of the probiotic. Stack it with the multivitamin as the base, as that foundation for the anti-aging protocol. Then you add to it. You add in the Max 35 or the cleanse for the first pillar on that foundation. That helps with the innate immune system. C60, very strong antioxidant. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost to rev up your energy levels. Now, if you pay attention to that, you are using this synergistically to be able to slow down the aging process. You're bringing down that inflammation. You're soaking up those free radicals. You're boosting up that immune system. You're helping your cardiovascular system. Super important, because when you do that, you're going to actually notice that you're slowing down the aging process. And it works even better when you get proper sleep, stay away from processed foods, drink filtered water, learn new things, do balancing exercises and stretching exercises, do a little bit more resistance training than cardio, maybe a 65-35 split or a 70-30 split. And you'll notice that you're slowing down the aging process, and over time, you're reducing the methylation of your genes. And in some cases, you're actually reversing the methylation. You can change the age of your organs. Slowly, it takes time, but it can be done. So please, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements and stack the way I'm telling you to. It's a very comprehensive program, but if you do it, it works. And it's not that expensive. You don't have to be Brian Johnson spending $2 million a year trying to slow down aging. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's talk about the DW clip.
Economists.
Really, these commodities.
Hey, look who it is.
I heard you got a new deck. It's a deck warming gift.
It's a work of art.
Knock, knock. Hi, neighbor. Happy deck warming.
Thanks, Gladys. With decorators, the neighbors will notice. Decorators stand out.
Every deck needs a gnome.
Specializing in macroeconomics.
All right, so this is DW talking about how the Iran war is reshaping global oil exports and the balance of power. So it's really important to realize there's a big geopolitical play that is taking place, that even with a full-blown end of hostilities in the region, energy, the use of it, the distribution of energy is going to change forever.
What does it mean to have confidence in legal AI? How about something that removes friction from everyday tasks like matter creation, whilst also providing advanced features like co-authoring and version history? Start building AI confidence. Watch the full video now.
It takes 90 seconds for this NASA-engineered AC cool down your room. It's smaller than a toaster.
Global oil prices have surged past $126 a barrel, their highest since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, as tensions between the United States and Iran escalate sharply. At the center of it all, the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for global energy and a strategic lever of power. With the two sides locked in a high-stakes standoff, US President Donald Trump has issued a blunt warning to Tehran on his Truth Social platform, saying it had better get smart soon. Now, this post comes as the status of talks with Iran remains uncertain and as control over energy flows increasingly shapes geopolitical influence. The impact is being felt worldwide. Rising costs, market jitters, and growing uncertainty for billions. And there are fresh concerns about even more volatility ahead. The United Arab Emirates says it plans to withdraw from OPEC, potentially shaking the balance of global oil supply. Meanwhile, a leaked Pentagon assessment suggests it could take up to 6 months to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz if a deal is reached, though the Pentagon insists that report is inaccurate. So where does this go next? Are we looking at a short-term spike or the start of a more profound shift in global energy. And as oil once again becomes a tool of leverage, who stands to gain and who loses in this reshaped balance of power? Christoph Rühl is going to help me answer that question. He's a senior research scholar at the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia University in New York. And he's an internationally renowned economist specializing in macroeconomics and energy economics. Christoph, thank you so much for talking to us today. So we're seeing Brent crude surging to its highest level since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Just tell us what exactly is behind this sudden spike. What is driving it?
What is driving it is, first of all, what everybody is talking about, namely the disruption which we're seeing in the Straits of Hormuz. If one looks a little bit closer, many people have asked initially after the attacks on Iran started, why the oil price is not reacting much stronger when it moved to 90 and then 100. And there was a question mark, why didn't we see a much stronger reaction initially? The answer is that when this war started, we had a huge amount of inventories in the system. Oil was in excess supply. There was more oil produced than consumed in these days. And there was a huge amount of oil on the water, Russian oil, which couldn't.
This is the point that I was making earlier, where the OPEC had more oil pre-war produced than what was needed. It was as if they wanted to buffer the shock, but also to be able to benefit with higher oil prices.
Sold Iranian oil, which couldn't be sold. There was a massive buildup, in particular in Chinese strategic reserves. Nobody knows how much, but everybody knows it's giant. And there was normal reserves and inventories in Western Europe and the US and Asia, Japan and Korea. And these inventories are now starting to evaporate. They are starting to be burned.
So what's interesting here? Okay, so you had countries building up their reserves for a potential shock, but then the shock comes and they're starting to burn that down. They're starting to use them down. But OPEC a year ago was producing more oil, stating that global demand will get higher. Okay. And they were producing all this oil at a lower future price. And so people were like going, that doesn't make any sense. The future price is in the 50s, $58 to $61 a barrel. Why are you producing all this oil? Oh, the demand will get higher. All right. And some of the experts were saying they were trying to take market share from the United States, which made kind of sense because the cheaper the oil, then some of the oil producers will slow down their production in the United States. So it made sense, the story, pre-war. But once you understand that there was a war coming, they were building up supply to buffer the shock, knowing there are going to be a lot of countries that burn down their reserves and will need to refill their reserves. Now, I think all the insiders of this thought that the war would be done within 30 days. And the war is not done. And officially, according to Trump, it is, but we still have a problem with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So I think the inside experts are a little caught off guard in terms of how long it's going to take. And this is where the blockade is probably the best option to reduce the actual destruction of other options. But it's going to take a longer time to chokehold and slowly suffocate the economy of Iran to do this, versus blowing up their whole economy by destroying their infrastructure, destroying their energy grid, their bridges, maybe even some of their wells or oil fields. So how long will this take? Who knows? But I suspect that oil is going to be elevated for a little while here. Probably traded in the 94 to 104 range.
True. So initially the worry was not so big because one thought, okay, as long as no production hardware, no production facilities are physically destroyed or damaged, we can just wait until this war is over, use up our inventories, and then the world goes back to normal. Now it turns out the inventories are getting close to empty, and the disruption is far from over. And instead of one blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, we have now two, with the US blocking Iranian oil and Iran blocking the rest of the strait. And so the worries are manifest now. What happens if the disruption shows up in the flows of oil to the consumer? And this is happening right now. And the answer to that one is higher prices. The answer, the situation is a very simple one. You have demand and supply balanced in some form. Then supply falls off by 10 million barrels per day. That's 10% of global oil production, a huge, biggest disruption nominal terms ever. And now demand has to follow. How will demand come down if supply doesn't go up anymore? Either because government...
I think demand is going to slow down because economies around the world are going to start to slow down. Manufacturing is going to start to slow down. But there'll also be the need to fill up the reserves for these countries, and they're going to have to find another supplier. And the United States is going to benefit. The rerouting of the oil by the Saudis in the UAE is going to help. Russia is going to be selling oil on the market. Other production of oil in the North Sea is going to be needed. So you're going to have demand going up to fill reserves, demand going down with certain industries around the world, and that the supply has gone down, but other countries like the United States can ramp up supply, ramp up the production up to a certain level, and then be able to get more market share in this situation. So it's not supply goes down and demand goes down. It's a little bit more nuanced. Supply will go down, demand in certain industries and countries will go down. Countries that have low reserves their demand for oil will go up, and certain suppliers like the United States will sell more and produce more supply. So there's going to be a wave function that's taking place here.
Will regulate and will tell consumers to drive less, to fly less, or because prices get higher and consumers will choose to fly less and drive less and use less oil. And it seems to be that in the majority of countries, it will be the price who regulates demand. And that will be now a very painful process with big risks to the economy.
I mean, with Brent crude rising to such an extent, we've heard Tehran saying the world should prepare to pay $200 for a barrel of oil. I mean, at what price point does oil become genuinely destabilizing? How far can these prices go?
They can go much further, in particular because if you think of what oil really is, it's not something anybody uses directly. Nobody drinks oil, for example. It is something which is refined into different products. And these products, they go all the way from very heavy fuel oil for heavy trucking and then diesel to oil which is used in airplanes, and it's much more sophisticated. And what we are seeing is that the different types of refined products are developing very different pricing patterns. And the reason is that some of the refinery capacity is also in the Middle East or in Russia and has been taken out and is blocked from coming to the market. And as a result, things as different as the kerosene for airplanes has gone up tremendously, by almost 200% already. Diesel has gone up by about 150%, but the car gasoline has gone up by much less. And these kind of spreads will determine the economic impact. And unfortunately, things like diesel, industrial fuels are the ones which have suffered most so far. And that pattern seeks to continue. So nobody can give you an exact number where it will stop. But it is clear it will stop only if demand has come down to exactly the extent that supply has been diminished. And 10% demand reduction, demand destruction, as they call it, that's a lot.
You mentioned the price of gas, the price of petrol. I want to talk a little bit about how this is affecting people around the world. Let's start by listening to some voices from the US, where gas prices are now way over $4 a gallon. Let's take a listen.
Still managing company travel the old way? Do it the new way with Navan. All your work trips in one platform. Navan, work travel made easy. Get started for free.
I've known a few people already saying they don't know how they're going to get to work because it's so expensive right now. For me personally, I have family members who are ill and I can't go visit them across the state or up north because it's too expensive right now to drive. With gas, almost $5 a gallon, that's just ridiculous.
Gas prices are affecting me because all of a sudden I drive a lot less. I'm fortunate because I'm retired, so I can kind of pick and choose where I go. But at the same time, I look at the cost of everything. Gas prices don't affect just gas prices. It's also the price of groceries. It's the price, of just everything that's in the economy.
So very clear there how this is affecting people's everyday lives. Those people were in the US. Asia, of course, is very vulnerable to the price of oil. People there are really feeling the pinch. Iran is launching an energy conservation campaign. We heard from Fatih Birol, the executive director of the International Energy Agency. He's just warned again that the world is facing a major energy and economic challenge. Do you see things heading towards a global recession here?
It becomes increasingly likely. The longer this disruption takes, the more likely it becomes. There are some issues here worth keeping in mind. One is many people.
What I think is going to happen, it's not so much that oil prices and gasoline prices are going to be elevated for longer than expected that causes the recession. It's going to be that people will start having financial problems that leads to defaults on their loans or their credit cards. And when that happens, banks are going to start tightening up their lending, and credit will be restricted, curtailed. And when that happens, the recession hits.
Ask the question, so why is it that prices in the US go up if the US now has turned an energy and an oil exporter, which is true. Over the last 15 years, the US has become from the world's largest oil importer to an exporter to shale oil. So the first thing to understand is that this is a global market. If you cut off oil, so it's the famous bathtub. You cut off supply somewhere, the water level will be affected everywhere. And same with oil markets. You cut it off at one corner, it's a global market, prices will go up everywhere. There is no shelter in geographic diversification. The second thing to understand is many people rightly point out that the world today uses a lot less oil in its economies than it did 50 years ago during the big crises. 50 years ago, in order to produce, just to give you a number, $1,000 worth of global GDP, one needed almost 1 barrel of oil. 158 liters. It's huge for $1,000 of GDP. Now we are down to about half of that, but still it's giant. It's 70 liters, which we use per $1,000 of GDP. But the flip side of this is that oil is used only in areas where it's most productive, so like flying, where it can't be replaced, heavy transport, certain petrochemical processes. It's no longer used much in power generation, where it can be substituted with something else. And that means that the effect of a disruption now is in general is less visible, but it's more effective. It's a little bit like rare earths. Not much of it is being used, but where it is used, it is irreplaceable. And therefore, this is very painful. And this is something which I think the US administration is underestimating. We are now in a situation where there's almost a race. The US hoping to bring Iran to its knees by blocking its oil exports, and Iran hoping to bring the US to its knees by creating a general global recession, which will then be mirrored in the US in the election results there. And it looks to me as if the calculation that Iran collapses tomorrow and the global economy will not is the second huge big miscalculation in that war. The first being that you attack Iran without thinking about what to do with the Straits of Hormuz, and something mind-boggling to oil analysts, but it happened. Now the second miscalculation could be to hope that one can block in the Iranian exports and in the long term force the Iranian economy to its knees without major damage to the global economy. That is almost certainly also a miscalculation. So the answer to your question straightforward is to say yes, it is highly likely and increasingly likely that this high oil prices cause damage. And the answer is simple. The longer it takes, the more the likelihood increases.
I wanted to bring in OPEC, the organization which coordinates and unifies the petroleum policies of member countries. We've had the UAE announcing that it's going to be leaving OPEC. If OPEC loses a producer of the UAE's scale, what does that mean for the organization's ability to manage global supply and, by extension, prices?
At the moment where we have a shortage of oil and a shortage of supplies, it will not be visible. It doesn't make any difference because at the moment the problem is how to get more oil. It will make a difference for OPEC when we are back in normal times where we have, as I said initially, an excess supply of oil. Actually, there is too much oil in the world in terms of what we are able to produce. The disruption we are seeing is not running out of oil. The disruption we are seeing is a disruption of transport. And it's important to understand the motive of the UAE behind leaving OPEC. Most of the discussion now concentrates on because they were more affected by the war than any other country in the region, bar Israel, because they were attacked very heavily by Iran, because they had ongoing disputes with Saudi Arabia, all sorts of short-term considerations here. But there is a long-term strategic reason for the UAE to do what it is doing. And that is that most observers agree that very likely, for the first time ever, global oil demand will reach a plateau or peak and even start to decline in about 10 to 15 years' time. Oil markets have always been growing. And now if that changes, then the whole game of the global oil market will change in a straightforward way. If you have a market which shrinks because oil demand starts to go down, then for any oil exporter, in order to keep at least his export volume stable, he needs to increase market share. By definition, the market gets smaller. You want to sell the same amount in this market. You need to increase the share of the market you have. How do you do this normally? By price competition. So this looks like if we move into an age where oil is not only abundant, but where producers have to compete on price against each other, a race to the bottom. And no cartel, which is not controlling the whole market, and OPEC only controls half of the market, 50%. No cartel can protect its members from that. And in particular, in times like that, the cheap producer will be king. The cheap producers are sitting in the Gulf of Arabia, in the GCC, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. These countries will suffer the most from OPEC having quotas in place. And that's why the UAE left, because they saw the signs. They also knew if they do it right now, there will be no big discussion, there will be no immediate impact. People will be way too busy looking at the Iranian war to take care of what one important OPEC member is doing. By the time that war is over, by the time the damage is repaired, by the time oil returns to excess supply, the UAE will sit outside of this organization, being able to increase its production without being hamstrung by OPEC production quotas. And that's the real reason here.
So where does that leave OPEC? Because, I mean, the world's energy mix is changing, isn't it? It was changing already. Renewables are increasing. So are you saying that gatekeepers like OPEC are essentially going to be relevant and irrelevant in the long term?
One has to be careful. OPEC's death has been announced many times and never happened. But in principle, oil is still the largest fuel of all the fuels, including fossil and non-fossil fuels and renewables in the world by far. But if it is true, and one also has to say that global energy markets as a whole have always been growing. We don't have a single commercially traded fuel which has ever declined in absolute terms. Everything has been continuously increasing since the Industrial Revolution. But if it is true that we are close to a situation where peak oil demand occurs, so where oil demand starts to decline, then an organization like OPEC will become obsolete and its members will start to run away from it because it will be competition on price, and by that I mean that whoever produces most cheap oil will have the biggest market share, and for that the UAE will then be prepared. Whether that happens is, I don't think, a question. You're right, renewables eat more market share. Eventually, those areas where oil is without competition now, like transport, will also be conquered by some other fuel, which will provide low carbon alternatives and all of that, as we already see in the case of electric cars. So it's not a question of if it happens, but it's a question of when it happens. When it happens, OPEC will be disappearing.
Let's talk more about renewables. Do you see governments investing more in renewables in order to be more energy resilient, as a result of what is happening right now between America and Iran?
This is actually, especially in Europe, this is a very funny discussion. Because if you think back just a few years, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, before that invasion, when you talked about energy in Europe, it was all about climate change and the energy transition. Nothing else really mattered to most participants in the energy discussions. Then Russia attacks Ukraine. All of a sudden, people realize that renewables have an energy security problem too, because of the intermittency problem. Sometimes no wind, sometimes no solar, and no storage capacity for wind and solar power. And suddenly the debate in Europe switched 180 degrees, and it became the important topic for the winter of 21-22 became, where do we get enough oil and coal and gas from in order to avoid the lights going out and in order to let the heating staying on? The very fuels one wanted to eradicate before. And for a while, this was resolved, and fossil fuels really proved how flexible they are in securing energy security in that sense, if it comes to a disruption of other sources, because they can be easily stored. They can be divided down to, from a big industrial facility down to a cigarette lighter, and they can be transported over any border. The sun and the wind cannot be transported over borders other than in the shape of electricity, which is expensive and cumbersome. And now, a few years fast forward, we have a disruption in the fossil market, the oil and gas disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, and the European discussion starts to flip back. Oh, we need more renewables, and we need more domestic supplies. The truth of the matter is, neither of them alone, fossils or renewables, can generate complete energy security. Nothing can generate complete energy security. The answer to solving the problem of energy security is one which Churchill has given 100 years ago, when he said, the answer to the energy security problem lies in diversity, and in diversity alone, meaning you need all of the above, and you need it from many geographic locations. And there's, of course, another problem on the horizon. As the globalization process stalls, and as trades and tariffs and all the wars which we're seeing fragment the globalization of economies, the integration of economies, it becomes harder for countries like European countries who don't have many resources on their own to guarantee that the lights stay on and that driving can be continued. And the task of developing alternatives which can be produced in-house, like renewables, becomes bigger and bigger. But right now, we are not there yet. We cannot switch to renewables 100% because we cannot store these energies.
Talking about diversity, which is what you just mentioned, Trump doesn't believe in diversity, though, does he? He doesn't believe in renewables.
And there's a lot of companies out there that are tied to VCs and even some private equity that are working on that problem of storage of electricity through renewables, solar power, wind, right, and being able to store. So there's different companies doing different techniques for building these storage capacities, these batteries, to be able to keep the flow of energy stable when needed. All right. But you're still talking 10, 20 years out before this is mainstream. So anytime someone says the answer is renewables, well, you still have infrastructure problems. You have storage problems. You have dissemination of the power problem. So oil and fossil fuels is going to be here for a long time.
He wants to export US oil. Do you see the Iran war in this situation proving to be an advantage to the US? I mean, do you see the US now in the process of becoming one of the world's major oil suppliers?
You got to have the best to be the best.
Planning to move out of state soon? Peak moving season is around the corner. Make sure to lock in your lower.
It already is. The US is the biggest oil producer in the world, and it is starting to become an exporter. This does several things. One thing to really keep in mind is that it is rare that something originates in energy markets and affects the global economy and the global political situation. Usually, energy markets are at the receiving end of politics and the economy. One example is the 70s, which we already mentioned, and one example is now caused by what is called the shale revolution. Within the span of 10, 15 years, America became from the biggest oil importer of the world to an exporter, to something which Trump calls not only energy independent, but energy dominant. And it is true that without this situation, which privileges the US enormously in its dealings with the outside world, we probably would not have a war in Iran right now, because the US would not have dared to cut itself off from supplies to the extent they actually did. It is also true that the current situation must be a flashing alarm sign. All lights must flash red in China. China is still more than before dependent on energy imports, oil, gas, coal, everything. And they can only watch with horror how the US can afford to disrupt that global system, and all they get is small domestic protests, whereas China would be really in trouble if it hadn't these big strategic reserves we mentioned earlier. And thirdly, it is also true that the current American administration is relatively ruthless and simplistic in its thinking, and really believes they can sustain that situation a long time longer, which is true when you only look at fossil fuels, because they have enough, the planet has enough. And you can translate that immediately into a strategic and into a military advantage. That it doesn't function as easily is also something we are seeing now in the direction of Iran being much more resilient than people expect. And the global economy, damaging the global economy will hurt the American economy as well. Damaging global energy markets hurts American energy markets as well.
But it's important to realize that the rate of change is going to be different. The economy in Iran will fall faster than the world economy. The world economy will fall faster than the United States economy.
The world is still interconnected. But this danger, the real danger is in this continued drive towards fragmentation of the global economy, which we are seeing originating in the US, which is the opposite of healthy, which is the opposite of boding well for the rest of the world.
So to sum it up, Christoph, I mean, do you see this more as a temporary geopolitical shock, or would you say that this war has essentially restructured global energy markets in the long term?
I see it at the moment. We are still on the sort of side of the Rubicon where things can be repaired. If the war would stop tomorrow, if the US would find a way out, which is hard to see other than actually physically invading, we could still return basically to the world we have seen before. Also, if the energy systems changes, it will be in the direction, there will be the immediate lesson, will be more supply diversity, there will be more pipelines in the Middle East, there will be more emphasis in not neglecting bottlenecks. The next one is in the Straits of Malacca in Asia, which will be a need to address before a blockade is repeated, like in Hormuz. And it will be probably to give more weight to renewables, not only because of climate reasons, but also because they make, to some extent, countries less dependent on imports. But autarky is not a good solution. So what I'm trying to say is energy markets are huge and they are slow-moving beasts. There will be changes coming, but they will be slow. There is a physical impossibility of changing them all of a sudden over the last few years. We have seen that when we tried to carry out this energy transition, which in terms of global markets didn't go very far. The results now will be slower, but change is inevitably, but gradual, I would sum it up.
Christoph Rühl from the Center on Global Energy Policy.
I think also another important feature is the resilience or lack of resilience of the American in their spending power. It is pretty amazing that we're at an all-time high for the S&P 500 with this oil shock. All right. I don't think many experts would have said that. Now, I still have a price target for the S&P 500 at 7,400 to 7,800. I might move my target a little bit up closer to 8,000 by year end. All right. So, but equities are doing pretty well. But the question is can it continue? A lot of people are buying the dip, the way they should be. And, the stock is moving forward. And I think we're getting closer to the point where actually the retail investor can keep the market buoyant compared to the institutional investor. Now, institutional investing is still very large, but the power of the retail investor now is it's starting to get stronger. And so when you have institutional investors thinking that there's going to be a downdraft for the S&P 500, but it doesn't materialize because you have the retail investor coming in to fight it and buying the dip. So it's keeping it buoyant. So how long can this last? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. So I think that's also to keep that in mind. Well, what I'm going to do is start. I want to go into Jack Keen's perspective on what's going on with the war here. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gel. You can get it in two different ways. You can get it in the tube form or in the quick dispenser form. Use in the same way. You can apply it on your skin daily for a topical daily treatment. You can put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn to help to heal it quicker, about 1/3 of the time quicker. And if you're not feeling well because of the cold season, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your nose, around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5.5 hours. It's very high quality structural nanosilver gel. You should have some at home. You never know when you need it. Also have some at work. You never know when you need it. It's really important. And like I said, it's dual purpose. Heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will help to detoxify your body, reduce inflammation, and soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. Now, this is really important because it's going to help your immune system, help with your brain function, help with your cardiovascular system. Your immune system and endocrine system will improve by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals. You'll get healthy by taking this every day. You can mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. I mix it with hummus every day. Now, there's two types of the barley that I have. You can get the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. The gladiator barley does the same thing as the heirloom barley, but it gives you one added benefit. The gladiator barley will help to build muscle when you do resistance training. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley, and you can stack it with the Boomer Boost that will help you to improve your A1C levels and slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. And collagen. Collagen will help with your skin, nails, and hair, musculature, bone density, and joint health. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. Again, it's a powder, and you mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. I put it in hummus. So please go to my store and get the collagen. It's a high quality product, and you can stack it with the collagen. And what this will do is remodel your joints. If you have arthritis or a sports injury, take this every day. And what this will do is help to remodel the actual cartilage and rebuild the cushioning of the joint. It'll help to reduce joint erosion and help to block the pathway that produces inflammation. So please go to my store, get the collagen. It's a great supplement to help to reduce osteoarthritis and help to remodel a sports injury, and stack it with the collagen for max benefit. All right. You can take them separately, but you get a synergistic benefit when you stack them together. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. I also have structural nanosilver soaps that are in stock. You can get it in peppermint. It's very high quality. It'll help to cleanse your pores. Use it every day. And because it has structural nanosilver, it also helps to neutralize. A very high quality soap. And structural nanosilver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and with good oral hygiene, you're improving your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. That's super important. And because this has the structural nanosilver, it'll help to neutralize. This toothpaste has no fluoride. It's a very high quality toothpaste that you should be taking every day, especially during the cold season. Why? Because it has structural nanosilver. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor that'll help to absorb calcium. If you do resistance training, it's going to help to build denser bone. Vitamin D3 also helps your cardiovascular health. And vitamin D3 helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis if they're infected. Super important, especially during the cold season. You should be taking vitamin D3 every day. And vitamin D3 at higher doses with doing light resistance training can remodel osteoarthritis and reduce it. And super strong relief. Super strong relief will help to reduce pain or eliminate pain. Now, if you have a bruise, sprain, a pulled muscle, even tension headaches, and osteoarthritis, apply this on the skin, and within about 90 seconds, the pain is diminished or eliminated. Now, for tension headaches, put it around your shoulders and neck and your temples and forehead to help to reduce that tension headache. So please go to my store and get the super strong relief. This is great for sports injuries and osteoarthritis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now let's listen into General King.
Honey, look who's here.
Heard you got a new deck.
Wow. Is that our deck?
Yeah. It's a deck warming gift. Took several hours to get the icing right.
With decorators, the neighbors will notice. Decorators stand out. Did you know Fabletics just launched a denim line?
Denim.
Fabletics now has denim. Real denim. That's right.
Welcome back. Good Thursday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Thursday, April 30th. It is 8:02 on the East Coast. Federal Reserve Chairman nominee Kevin Warsh cleared a key hurdle this week to lead the central bank after the Senate Banking Committee advanced his nomination yesterday. A full confirmation vote is expected the week of May 11th, as I reported earlier. Outgoing Fed Chair Jay Powell spoke at the final policy meeting as chairman yesterday, saying he's going to stay on the Fed board even after stepping down as chairman. Watch.
After my term as chair ends on May 15, I will continue to serve as a governor for a period of time to be determined. I plan to keep a low profile as a governor. There's only ever one chair of the Federal Reserve Board. When Kevin Warsh is confirmed and sworn in, he will be that chair.
Joining me now is South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. Senator, it's great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Maria. Good to be with you.
And should we expect a full Senate vote and a confirmation the week of May 11th?
Absolutely. We should certainly expect it within the first 2 weeks that we're back in May. It's great news for the American people. We're finally going to have a Fed that's independent, focusing more on interest rates than they are on politics and climate change. So it's refreshing to see Kevin Warsh come in and take over at the Fed. We're excited about that.
Yeah. So what do you want his priorities to be? I mean, this morning we've been talking about the state of the economy, Senator. And, you know, even with this war and the spike in oil, you've got this economy chugging along. Scott Bessent told me a couple of weeks ago he would still expect 2% plus economic growth. Jay Powell yesterday said consumer spending is staying strong. What strikes you most right now about the economic backdrop, the macro story?
Well, I think we have a very healthy economy because of President Trump. We have to look back at the Biden years. Remember, 9% inflation, interest rates went in the same direction. The great news is the last 15, 16 months, President Trump has pulled a miracle. We finally have a healthy, strong economy going in the right direction.
Oh, this video is way too long. I apologize. I thought this was a clip and this is like an hour-long show. No, I don't want to play this. I was waiting for General Keane to pop up. So let's take a look at something else here. I apologize for that. All right, let's listen into Waters talking about time's up. With Iran.
Fox News alert, the commander-in-chief's just been presented military options that would knock the snot out of the enemy.
Do we want to go and just blast the hell out of them and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of them?
I prefer not. Forever? On a human basis, I prefer not, but that's the option.
Yesterday, the president spent the afternoon consulting his top national security team in the Situation Room. Vance, Rubio, Hegseth, and the CIA director all there. As CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper and General Raisin Kane briefed them on strike packages for one final blow. The session lasted 45 minutes. He was reportedly presented with strike options on infrastructure, a ground assault on the Strait, and an uranium extraction. But the commander-in-chief keeping his cards close to his vest.
If you're not using a business travel platform like Navan, you're really missing out. Hi, I'm Ellie, and I'm the People of...
Are you considering new strikes on Iran?
Why would I tell you that?
The war just hit day 60, and the press is telling the president, time's up.
Mr. President, it's day 60. Are you going to seek congressional authorization for...
Well, no other country has ever done it. It's never been, as you know, most people consider it totally unconstitutional. Also, we had a ceasefire, so that gives you additional time. But no other country's done it. We're in the midst of a big victory. This is a victory like we haven't had since Venezuela.
Trump sent a letter to Congress today telling him no need for an extension. The ceasefire's already terminated the war. Hegseth and General Kane have spent all week on the Hill, testifying and briefing senators behind closed doors. Of course, Dickie B's already leaking.
I do have the impression from some of the briefings that I have received, as well as other sources, that an imminent military strike is very much on the table, which is deeply disturbing.
What about classified? Does Dick Blumenthal not understand? Anyway, the firepower we have in the region isn't a secret. After a 3-week timeout, CENTCOM now has twice the amount of combat power that it did at the start of the war. We have 3 carriers in theater, all assets in pre-strike position. Our sailors aboard the USS John Finn, a guided missile destroyer, have been conducting live fire exercises in the Indian Ocean. They're ready and lethal. Now the Super Stallion is in the region. It's one of the largest and heaviest lift choppers in our arsenal. Here it is preparing to land on the USS Tripoli. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane says it's time to finish the job.
I think option one is return and finish what we started. We spent 3 weeks here trying to work something out with these guys. Let's go finish that once and for all. Complete that mission that we've given to them. And
when that happens, oil is going to go down. So if you want to prevent world recession,
or economic turmoil in the United States, it's better to kick the shit out of Iran now instead of this slow bleed that may not topple the regime. So it's a win-win. You get the nuclear material, you knock out the IRGC, and oil precipitously drops. But the longer this blockade happens, stays in effect, the longer people will start to suffer, and the increased probability of a world recession increases. So it's really important to just get the job done. This is Trump shouldn't have been doing this. Like, I'm going to, create a deal. I'm going to have a deal with this guy and this guy and this guy. He should have just kicked the shit out of them right when, after the first deal fell through. And this is where Trump failed. Now, Trump, I'm glad he's president, but it doesn't mean that he is 100% right on everything. And I feel that he executed this war with not enough veracity. He should have knocked out the energy grid, and he should have knocked out the bridges when he said he was going to, instead of holding back to accelerate the process.
We can go through a list of targets, but there's leadership targets out there. There's ballistic missiles out there. Right. There's the remnants of the nuclear program that's out there. There's drone storage that's out there, and energy infrastructure, etc. There's plenty of targets that we have assigned that we want to finish.
Iran's starting to buckle under the blockade. They just sent us a new peace proposal. Before, they said they wouldn't talk as long as the blockade remained. Now, they definitely want to talk and said they're willing to talk Monday. They also want Trump to tone down his rhetoric. Trump's threats are driving him crazy, and they can't tell what's going to happen next. And they want to talk about opening up the strait now. And then they'll talk about the nukes if we drop sanctions and the blockade. But it still sounds kind of like your typical Iranian haggling. The president says no deal.
If this were a fight, they'd stop it. You know that expression, it's true. But they're not coming through with the kind of deal that we have to have, and we're going to get this thing done properly. We're not going to leave early and then have the problem arise in 3 more years.
The Iranians, as squirrely as they are still signaling that a deal is possible. And this just in, Trump just gave Kushner and Witkoff another weapon. Nick Stewart from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies has just been added to the negotiating team. He's got a reputation as a hawk and is adamant about removing the uranium from the regime. But we're also dealing with an underground madhouse.
As you know, it's a very disjointed, unfriendly leadership, unfriendly to each other. They're not getting along. They're very, very confused by what's happened because essentially most of their military has been wiped out. But we just had a conversation with Iran. Let's see what happens. But I would say that I am not happy. Their leadership is very disjointed.
This is where Trump is failing. Just get the job done and stop talking. So, okay, you have a blockade, great, but get the job done. Get the nuclear material and overthrow the IRGC, all right? Instead of saying, well, we're going to make a deal, we're going to make a deal, and it never happens. And all he's doing is eating the clock. He's eating the clock politically. So it's hurting him in terms of the War Powers Act of 1973. It's hurting him in the midterm election. It's hurting people's pocketbook because energy prices are higher. So just waiting this out is not the best policy. The best policy was to destroy the enemy. Not like, well, we're going to have a ceasefire. Well, the reality is we needed the ceasefire to be able to rearm. But, the bottom line is this. Stop the negotiations. This is the part of Trump I don't like. He thinks that everything is like a real estate deal, that he's negotiating. We're going to make a deal. He sounds like a mobster. I voted for him. I'm glad he's president for the time. Presidents are judged as good presidents or bad presidents based on not their capability, but how they manage through a certain crisis, or how they manage through the time that they're president, right? Carter was terrible at his time. Maybe he would have been a better president in a different time period. George Washington probably would not be the right president for today. Lincoln probably would be not the right president for today. So it's also the circumstance. But this idea of Trump and the way he talks is kind of like street-ish, mobster-ish. I don't like it. I don't like it. It's time for, what I want Trump to do is to clean up the mess. All right? And I want him to just shut up. I want him to clean up the mess in Iran, where the theocratic regime is gone, and that there is the seculars within the society that rise up and are self-governing. And this problem with oil dissipates and is trading at a normal range. I want him to clean up the East Wing mess and build that ballroom and stop using a wrecking ball on everything. And I want him to stabilize the political landscape so the Republican Party can maintain power in the legislative branch. And then I want him to shut up after that. I want him to just write out his last 2 years as president and just shut up.
Very argumentative with each other. They come back, one says one thing, one says another. They're very confused.
We're getting peace proposals, but they're not coming from the gay Ayatollah. He isn't actually in charge.
Tired of sifting through jobs that don't feel like the right fit? Introducing Indeed Career Scout. Find the job that's right for you.
The military is making him put out statements like Baghdad Bob. No Lips says our bases are paper tigers. Okay, Lips. The moderates, they want a deal, but the military wants suicide by cop, by Trump. Hardliners believe the embargo is an act of war, and they want to start shooting. They're either bluffing, have a death wish, or just want to jack up oil prices again to squeeze 47. But even though they're on their knees, they're still showing a little creativity. Kamikaze dolphins. The Persians want to strap mines to dolphins to weaponize the strait. Don't tell PETA. These rogues are desperate. The blockade's already forced 45 ships to do a 180. And now the Pentagon is using AI to hunt down Iranian mines. The president says it's basically already over.
The blockade has been unbelievable, powerful, 100%. It's been actually unbelievable. If we left right now, we had a great victory, but we're not doing that.
The Pentagon says the blockade's already cost the Iranians $5 billion. And inflation is so high, it'd make Biden blush. If you want to block a cheese in Iran, you have to be a millionaire. It costs 7 million rial just to buy some smoked Gouda. You want a new car? That'll be 25 billion rial, billion with a B. But we hear the camel business is booming. If a rickety old sedan costs that much, how much do you think it's going to cost the Iranians to rebuild their whole country? Operation Economic Fury squeezing them like an anaconda. And this just in, Scott Bessent slapping sanctions on any ships paying tolls to these pirates. He's also sanctioning their currency exchanges, these financial rackets that move oil revenue to the Iranian military and their proxies. And guess what currency the Iranians use for oil sales? The Chinese yuan. So Beijing, not happy. And in 2 weeks, Xi's honoring a very special guest.
Will you accept your China trip given the blockade?
China, it's going to be amazing. The visit with China and Chairman Xi, that's going to be great. We have the trip with China coming up. And I think it'll be an amazing event.
If we don't have a deal in 2 weeks, the president's going to be sitting across the room from the Chi-Coms with the blockade still in full effect. And it's maybe going to force Xi's hand. It could really give the
Oil futures are suggesting that there's not going to be a resolution in the Strait of Hormuz. So Trump is going to probably be facing President Xi with a blockade. And that's going to hurt the Chinese because they need oil from the Middle East.
A diplomatic opportunity to nudge the Ayatollah to the table and look like a serious world power because the embargo is blocking his cheap supply of illicit Persian oil. And the other tankers headed towards China, they're all getting scared of getting seized. They're playing cat and mouse with the 7th Fleet, taking longer and pricier routes. Now, while we're sticking up Xi's favorite gas station, we have them surrounded. Marine scouts are conducting live fire training in South Korea with 50 caliber rifles. Our Philippine allies have also been with us. U.S. Marines have been training shoulder to shoulder. U.S. Special Forces have been executing parachute operations with our Filipino friends. The Japanese are also inching closer. For the first time, the Japanese Army's highest operational command unit, alongside the U.S. Marines, are doing drills on southwestern islands near Taiwan. If you're China, it's a little too close for comfort. In a year, we've kicked them out of South America, the Middle East, and now we're just hanging next door with loaded rifles. The U.S. dollar is dominant, and Venezuela was a home run. Chevron says America's making mucho dinero.
Venezuelan government seems to be very interested in more U.S. investment in the country. A number of different companies have been down there taking a look at things. This would be good for Venezuela, it'd be good for the United States.
Exxon and ConocoPhillips are also back in Venezuela. They said it would never happen, and they were all wrong. Once Trump sticks the landing in Iran, the president guarantees a golden age.
There is so much oil out there. It's pent up. It's locked up in the Strait of Hormuz, a beautiful place. It's, I think they have close to 400 ships loaded up with oil. These people tried to hold up our country for years and years, the world, by closing up the Strait of Hormuz. When all of that stuff comes out, you're going to see prices dropping on gasoline like you've never seen.
Gas prices are high. There's no doubt about it. But he's promising relief right around the corner. You just have to trust him to keep his word. The president knew Operation Epic Fury was a risk, but he says it was worth it.
I did something that was, I don't know, foolish, brave, but it was smart. I would do it again, but I thought the numbers would be much worse. I thought the stock market would go down much more. I thought the oil prices would go up much more. I said, but we have no choice. Whether it does or doesn't, I have to do what's right.
Today, new all-time highs for the S&P and NASDAQ, and oil prices down over $10 for midweek. So far, the base is all in.
We're in a war because I think you would agree we cannot let lunatics have a nuclear weapon. Do you agree? Whoa.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35 or the Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. This will help to boost up your innate immune system. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, swish it in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity by neutralizing. Also, maintain a mucosal barrier and help the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. And by doing that, you're boosting up your immune system. I've been doing this protocol for 6 years, every day, teaspoon a day, every day. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season, take a tablespoon or two a day. And also, I have structural nano silver lozenges and drops. You can get it in orange splash with vitamin C, Manuka honey. And for the drops, you can get it in honey and lemon and blueberry. Not blueberry, cherry flavor. So please go to my store, get a few bags for your household. They're perfect for the allergy season and also the cold season. And if you're cleaning in your home and you're surrounded by dust because you're cleaning the basement or the garage, or you're outside in the garden and you're exposed to antigens, take the drops and the lozenges. It help to soothe your throat. And it helps to neutralize because it's a structural nanosilver. It's really important to take once you start having that throat irritation. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And again, those lozenges and drops are perfect for the allergy season. So please go to my store, use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. This is the end of my broadcast. Thank you for joining. Please make sure you subscribe to my channels and hit the like button when you're watching the videos. Share the links and go to my store and get the great supplements that I offer. And by following my protocol, you'll slow down the aging process and get healthy. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.